I had to hitchhike from the airport in the middle of the night with two strangers back. If you ever went to college out of state, then you would be able to relate to this. When I was growing up and I went to college on the East Coast, and I was, at the time, my family was living like on the West Coast of California. So because of that, I made the commute from California to Virginia a lot. Like anything in life, the more you do it, the more chances you have of things just going horribly wrong. And that's what happened one time. It was so bad. It happened almost 10 years ago, and I still remember it very, very vividly. Little side note, has nothing to do with the story, but there's this local coffee shop in California called Phil's, and the order that I get is, it's called a mocha tesora, and it basically tastes like a brownie with coffee in it. And on top of that, this is the large. The medium was 30 cents cheaper than the large, which is what we were going to get, but I ended up getting the large because it was only 30 cents. They do that for a reason. Back to my story. So typically what would happen when I was in college was I wouldn't come home for every break, but I would come home for Christmas break, spring break, and then like summer breaks. And the rest of the time I would just typically stay in Virginia, just because if it was less than a week, it just wasn't really worth it. And this particular time I was coming home from a spring break, and typically with the flight pattern, I would end up in Phoenix and then go from Phoenix to Virginia, where I was going to school. The flight from LA to Phoenix was totally fine, and then when I finally landed, I was actually, instead of going directly to Virginia, I was going to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I would have a layover, and that's where everything kind of started going wrong. Now, normally, traditionally, I would always have issues with like winter break stuff because of weather on the East Coast, but because it was spring break, I didn't think that there was going to be any issues, but I was wrong. What my itinerary originally said was when I would get into Charlotte, I would have about an hour to basically just chill and not really have to worry about it. My flight was not supposed to take off for an hour. So what I did was I just did what I normally did. I got food and a drink, and then I walked to my gate and just waited. And that's where everybody's worst, like that's where everything starts to go wrong, when you're sitting at the gate and your time keeps getting pushed back and back and back and back. So I'm sitting at the gate, and it gets to the point where the flight is so delayed that they end up just canceling the flight altogether. And this is at 11 or 12 o'clock p.m. and there's no other flights. Like they basically said you're just going to be stranded in Charlotte. Now keep in mind, Charlotte, from my final destination to Charlotte, was only 3 hours driving. So it was like less than a 60-minute flight. And honestly, most of the people on this flight were students of the university that I was going to. So while we're all in the terminal trying to figure out what to do, these two gentlemen next to me, they weren't students. They just worked in the town that, or they had a conference or whatever in the town that the university was in. They started talking about the possibility of getting a rental car. And me overhearing that, I obviously was intrigued, because I had two options at that point. That was either sit in the airport and sleep on the floor, or maybe possibly hitchhike with these two guys that I've never met before. So the first thing that popped into my head was what your mom taught you when you were a little kid, like stranger danger. Don't go with anybody, and don't go near anybody that you don't know, especially when you're traveling. And then the guy next to me actually heard them talking about it, so me and him started talking, and how bad of an idea it would be to go with these two random people in the middle of the night with an Uber or with a rental car that we don't own, that they're going to be driving. It's just a terrible idea. And about 30 minutes goes by, and we slowly start to convince each other that it might be a good idea and a better idea than just staying in the airport. And like I said, and eventually we ended up asking them if they still would be willing to give two people rides for like, we had no money, we had no prospects, but we were literally hitchhiking, and they said yes. While we were doing all of that too, there was a faculty member that was part of that school that actually started to organize a bus to come pick up all of the students, but that would have taken at least 6 hours, because it had to leave from the university, and then it would have been 6 hours minimum. So considering that it was like 12 o'clock, 1 a.m., I picked the option of getting home before the sun came up with two strangers was the better option at the time. Also, I probably picked the worst spot to do that talking head. This is like a bike path / hiking path, but I mean, look at that view. I don't think I've told you where we are, have I? Planning this trip, we originally wanted to go to the Redwoods, but we found out that was like going to be a 6-hour drive one way to get to the Redwoods from the place that we're staying. So because of that, we started looking at other just places to go that wasn't like the beach, because we already planned on going to the beach, but we also wanted to go to like a national park or a forest or something, just to get kind of all of the little things that California has to offer, kind of out of our system. And the Yosemite actually came up, and then come to find out Savannah's actually never been to Yosemite, and I grew up going to Yosemite, and it was only 3 hours away, so naturally we decided to dedicate a day just to come into Yosemite and checking it out. We don't have any shoots, we don't have anything, we're just here just for fun, which is my favorite kind of trip. A lot of times we'll go to different locations, or like national parks. Like we've been to Glacier. We're going to Glacier a couple times this year too, but it's all for work. We do make vacations out of it, but the reason that we're going is for work. But today is strictly for just having fun. We keep seeing people float down this river in boats, and we want to figure out how we actually get one of those. I've never done that, and I don't really know how to begin to figure that out. So after some deliberating and convincing myself and the guy with me that it was a good idea, we decided to take them up on their offer to take us back home to our college, with literally meeting them 10 minutes beforehand. After we said yes, there was also, since I checked a bag and the guy that I was traveling with checked a bag, there was also we were kind of worried, or this was kind of an afterthought, but ended up really working out, how to get our checked bags out from underneath the belly of the plane. Turns out when they cancel flights, they actually just assign a carousel without asking anybody, and they just push them onto that carousel. So we found the corresponding carousel with our flight that was canceled, and we made our way to the rental car lot with our two new friends. As we were walking there, I remember this thought coming across my head. The thought was, I just met these people, and I have a 3-hour car ride at night in the middle of the dark. This is like at 2:30 in the morning at this point, and I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. I don't know if my small talk is going to last three and a half hours. Once we got in the car and we actually hit the road, it became very apparent that the people that we were hitching the ride from, they were just nice people, and they actually didn't know each other either. So literally, if there were 4 of us in the car, none of us had known each other prior to this experience, and we were all just trying to get back to Virginia, and it was great. So they ended up giving us a ride, and I ended up getting a ride actually all the way back to my dorm. They dropped us off at our 2 dorms, which we didn't live in the same dorm. We lived in 2 separate dorms on the opposite sides of campus, and they drove us to both of our dorms in the middle of the night. And I was talking about this with my mother afterwards, and she kind of brought something to my attention that I didn't really think about. It was really stupid. Like, hindsight, I probably wouldn't do that again. it was one of those decisions in the moment. It sounded like a great idea, but just thinking about it, older John, I probably wouldn't have done that. But nothing happened, and it was a great 3 hours. We did beat the bus back, so that's all that matters.